Welcome everyone, settle down, close your eyes and listen because sometimes the most painful stories come from the smallest places, the smallest houses, and the quietest streets. This is the story of the Harris family, a story born in a tiny American town called Willow Creek where the nights were cold, the streets were silent, and inside one broken house, four hearts cried quietly in the dark. The year was 2009. Inside a small wooden house at the end of a lonely road lived David Harris, 36 years old, a man lost inside the bottle. His pride was bigger than his patience, his anger stronger than his love. His wife Sarah Harris, only 32, carried a heart full of kindness, but her life had slowly turned into a storm of fear. Their son Ethan, only 9, and their little daughter Lily, just 7, had already learned what fear tasted like. They had learned to hide before they learned to read. They had learned silence before they learned to speak. Every night the same nightmare replayed itself. Sarah stood near the window, looking down the empty street, waiting, her hands shaking, her breath broken, her heart beating too fast. She always knew when he was coming, and every time the door opened, the whole house froze in panic. David walked inside with heavy eyes and an angry face. Sarah kept her head down, praying silently that tonight maybe he would not explode, but most nights he did. Sometimes he shouted, sometimes he threw things, sometimes his hands struck her face, and her tears fell silently onto the floor. Ethan and Lily hid behind the bedroom door, holding each other, shaking, crying into their small hands, while the sounds of anger hit their ears like thunder. Years passed like this, not for herself, but for her children. She could not break the home, even if the home was breaking her. She waited every day, hoping that somewhere inside David, the good man she once loved, might still be alive. One day Sarah could not hold her pain anymore. She stepped outside, walked down the quiet streets, and entered the small church at the end of Willow Creek. The church was empty, the lights dim, the floor cold. She knelt down and tears burst out of her like a storm. She told God everything. Every bruise, every scream, every night of fear. She told him how the children hid behind the door every time David came home. How they cried without making a sound. How she wished she could save them. Her voice trembled as she begged God, please change him, please bring peace, please let him become the husband and father she believed he once could be. Even the children had begun to live in constant fear. Whenever Ethan heard his father's footsteps, he grabbed Lily's hand and whispered, hide now. They would run into the small room and close the door quietly. Sometimes they cried together with their little heads tucked between their knees. They were too young to understand why their father hurt them, but old enough to feel the pain in their hearts. One evening, an old woman from the street came to Sarah. Her voice was gentle. She said, maybe if you cook his favorite meals, maybe if you pour love into everything, maybe his heart will soften. Sarah listened because she was desperate for any hope. She cooked carefully every night, standing near the stove with tears on her cheeks, waiting for a miracle. But nothing changed. Then one horrible night came. Sarah had been visiting her parents in Willow Creek and returned home later than usual. The house was dark. David was waiting. Dinner was not ready. His anger exploded like fire. He struck her again and again until she fell to the floor. Blood slid down her face, dripping onto her clothes. She wanted to call the police. She wanted to scream, but when she reached for the phone, he grabbed it away. Ethan and Lily cried so loudly that their voices cracked. They curled up together on the bed, unable to watch the pain their mother suffered. That night Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about leaving forever. She imagined picking up the children and running far away where David could never find them. She imagined peace, the kind she had not felt for years. For the first time, the thought felt real and close. She knew she could not let her children grow up in fear forever. But before she could make a decision, something unexpected happened. David left home the next morning to work in the factory. Hours later, the phone rang. There had been an accident. Sarah rushed to the hospital, her hands shaking, her breath short. She found David unconscious, bruised and broken, lying in a hospital bed. For 10 days he stayed there, silent and weak. When he came home after those 10 long days, he was different. His walk was slow, his eyes softer, his voice quiet. He looked at Sarah, and for a moment she felt her heart stop. She wondered if he would hurt her again, if the pain would return, if the nightmare would start all over. But instead he sat down gently and rested his head back, closing his eyes like he was tired of fighting the whole world. Sarah cared for him with a kindness she never lost. She cleaned his wounds, fed him, helped him sit up, wiped his tears when he cried from pain. Even little Ethan held his father's hand, guiding him to the bathroom, supporting him with his small, fragile arms. Lily held the glass of water carefully, hoping she could be helpful. The family that he once frightened now helped him heal with love he did not deserve. Slowly, he recovered. He returned to the factory, limping slightly but able to work. And the day he came home fully healed, everything changed forever. He entered the house quietly. Sarah stood near the kitchen, afraid to look at him, but he called her name softly. When she turned, she saw tears running down his cheeks. He walked toward her slowly and gently touched her shoulders. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Please forgive me. I will never hurt you again. I promise with all my heart." She stared at him, unable to speak. For years she had waited for these words, hoped for them, prayed for them, cried for them. He held her hands and cried like a broken man. He called Ethan and Lily. They walked toward him, afraid at first, but he knelt down and opened his arms. They fell into his embrace and he hugged them tightly, crying deeply, saying, "Forgive me, my children, forgive me. Please do not be afraid of me anymore. You are my family, you are everything to me." His tears fell on their hair and their small hands held his face as if they were touching a new father. Sarah walked to them and wrapped her arms around all three. She kissed David's head and whispered, "We were waiting for you to come back to us. You are part of this family. You always will be." And for the first time in years, she saw hope shining inside their home. At the end of the month, David handed his full salary to Sarah. He placed it gently in her hands and said, "Buy something beautiful for yourself and the kids. You deserve it." The children smiled, Sarah cried, and love returned to the Harris home like sunlight after a long storm. The real family life had finally begun. Days passed in Willow Creek, and for the first time the Harris house woke up to softness instead of shouting. The mornings felt lighter. The walls no longer shook with fear. The children no longer hid when the door opened. Everything began to breathe again. But healing is slow. Pain does not leave a home overnight. It leaves quietly, step by step, memory by memory, tear by tear. Sarah noticed small changes first. David walked softer. He spoke gently. Some nights he sat alone outside the house, staring at the sky as if asking himself why he had been so cruel. She watched him from the window and saw a man who was fighting his own demons inside his head. She saw guilt eating him quietly. She saw regret in the way he looked at his children, with sadness in his eyes. One night Sarah found him sitting on the bed, his hands shaking. He whispered that the accident had shown him who he had become. He said he remembered lying in the hospital thinking about Ethan, his little hands holding him the day he got home, thinking about the fear in Lilia's eyes, thinking about all the nights he destroyed the peace of his own home. He said he realized he was losing everything good in his life. His voice broke when he said, "I do not want to die as the man I was. I want to live as the father they deserve." Sarah placed her hand on his shoulder. She saw the truth in him. She saw a man trying to rebuild something he had broken with his own hands. She knew the change was real because for the first time he was scared to lose the love he had treated so carelessly. The next weeks were full of small but powerful moments. David would walk Ethan to school in the morning, holding his backpack lightly. Ethan looked unsure at first, but slowly the fear melted into comfort. When David bent down to hug him, Ethan hugged him back with a small, shy smile. Lily would sit beside David in the evening, drawing little shapes on paper, and one night she drew their whole family holding hands under a sun. David looked at it and tears filled his eyes. He kissed her forehead and whispered, "Thank you, my little girl. Thank you for giving me another chance." Sarah kept the home warm and peaceful, just like she always did, but now something new lived inside her heart. It was hope, hope she thought she had lost long ago. She watched her children laughing again. She watched them playing without fear. She watched David helping them with homework, sometimes struggling to read the books because he had never taken school seriously, but trying anyway. Every attempt was filled with sincerity and love, but healing also brings memories back. One night Ethan woke up crying. He dreamed of the old days, the shouting, the beating, the fear. He ran into Sarah's arms, shaking badly. David heard the crying and walked into the room slowly. Ethan looked at him, frightened, unsure if the old father had returned. David knelt down and opened his arms, but he did not force Ethan. He just kept his arms open, waiting. Slowly, Ethan stepped forward, his tears still falling. David hugged him, gently whispering, "I am here, I am not leaving, I am never hurting you again, I promise." Ethan cried against his chest, and Sarah watched quietly, her tears falling too. In that moment, the wounds inside their hearts began to close a little more. The next morning, the Harris family woke to a soft, bright day. Sarah was in the kitchen making breakfast. David walked behind her and placed his hand gently on her back. She froze for a second, old fear flashing through her mind, but when she turned, she saw love in his eyes, not anger. He whispered, "Thank you for staying. Thank you for not giving up on me." She felt her heart melting. She smiled through tears and said, "We stayed because we believed there was still goodness inside you, and now we can see it again." Some evenings, David sat with the children, telling them stories from his childhood, stories he had never shared before. He told them about fishing with his father in a small river near Willow Creek when he was a boy. He told them about the time he fell from a tree trying to impress his friends. The children laughed and asked for more stories. Sarah listened from the doorway, smiling quietly, her heart warm, seeing her family finally whole. One weekend, David came home with something wrapped in paper. He was wearing a nice and clean dress. He placed it on the table and called Ethan and Lily. They unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a small wooden frame carved by hand. A picture of the four of them sitting together on the porch smiling. He cleared his throat, trying not to cry, and said, "I want this to be our first new memory. Our first picture as a healed family." Sarah touched the frame, her eyes shining with tears. She placed it on the wall near the front door so everyone who entered their home would see the new beginning, the new life after pain. But the most powerful moment came one evening, very late. The house was quiet. The children were asleep. Sarah was folding clothes when David walked up behind her. He looked nervous, like he was about to confess something. He held her hands and said softly, "Sarah, I know I hurt this family in ways I can never undo. But I want to spend the rest of my life protecting you, loving you, giving you the peace you deserved from the beginning. Please let me rebuild everything I broke." Sarah looked at him, and for a long moment she said nothing. Then she stepped closer and rested her forehead on his chest. She whispered, "You already started rebuilding it. You came back to us. You changed. That is enough for me." David closed his eyes and held her tightly. And inside that quiet moment in that small wooden house in Willow Creek, something beautiful grew inside both of them. Not just forgiveness, but a new form of love. A love shaped by pain and strengthened by healing. As months passed, the Harris family began to shine. The children grew healthier, happier, louder, with laughter than ever before. David found a deep peace inside himself. He came home on time every day. He quit drinking completely. He joined church gatherings with Sarah. He even started helping neighbors fix small things around their houses. People in Willow Creek began to notice the change. They whispered softly to each other, saying, "Maybe miracles do happen in small towns too." One evening, Sarah stood in the doorway, watching David push Ethan and Lily on a swing. Ethan laughing loudly, Lily shouting with joy. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears sliding down gently. She remembered the long, painful nights, the fear, the bruises, the prayers, the hiding. And now she was looking at the same man playing with their children, like the father she always dreamed he could be. David looked up and saw her. He smiled, a soft, peaceful smile, the kind she hardly ever saw in their early years. He walked to her slowly, took her hands, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Thank you for waiting for me." She looked at him with love glowing in her eyes and said, "I waited because I believed our family deserved a second chance. You gave it to us." And from that day, the Harris home became a home full of warmth. Every night ended with smiles, not tears. Every morning started with hope, not fear. The terrible shadows of the past slowly faded. The Harris family walked into a new life, a life where love finally won. A life where forgiveness healed the deepest wounds. A life where patience and prayer brought back the man who had once been lost. And in that small American town called Willow Creek, their story became a quiet reminder that even after years of darkness, a single spark of change can bring light back into a home that had forgotten what love felt like. Thank you, dear listener, for staying with this emotional journey of the Dawson family. Your time means everything. If this story touched your heart, please support with a gentle subscribe so we can meet again in another beautiful voiceover world. Until then, stay safe, stay blessed, and goodbye.